Okay, well, let's unpack this. I mean, imagine trying to mathematically calculate human fear.
Right.
Like if someone threatens you is a threat of extreme pain, a second-degree felony. Well, a threat that just overcomes your, ordinary resolution is only a third degree.
Exactly.
How do you even begin to measure that? So, welcome to your custom deep dive. Today, we are looking at how the legal system trying to put the messy, traumatic reality of sexual coercion into this rigid, highly structured spreadsheet. We're exploring excerpts from a document titled MPC 213.pdf.
Yes.
And this covers the Model Penal Code, specifically Article 213, which is the code's complex, controversial, and frankly incredibly technical approach to rape and related offenses.
It really is. And to really do this justice and make sense of this whole spreadsheet of human behavior, we need a clear legal roadmap for you, the listener.
Definitely.
Today, we are going to break down the exact wording of the law to see how the code actually builds these definitions, step by step. Our path will move through the text by analyzing its foundational logic. We will start with Section 213.0, which lays out the core definitions.
Right.
Then we will move into Section 213.1, covering rape and gross sexual imposition. And finally, we'll examine Section 213.2, which governs what the code terms deviate sexual intercourse.
Got it. And to make sure we really pull this apart effectively, we are adopting a strict Socratic dynamic for this deep dive.
Okay, I like it.
My function today is to act as the inquisitor. I will guide the analysis, ask the foundational questions, and present the factual hypotheticals.
Makes sense.
Your function is to act as the analyst. You'll articulate the law, perform the structured legal analysis, and explain the underlying policy of, why these drafters made the choices they did.
I am ready. Let's begin the doctrinal analysis.
Perfect. So before we can even touch the actual crimes or their punishments, we really need to understand the Model Penal Code's highly specific vocabulary.
Yes, the definitions are everything here.
Right, because the drafters had to define the physical acts before they could criminalize the context around them. So, looking at Section 213.0, how does the MPC define the core physical acts that trigger these statutes?
Well, the code establishes two primary definitions here, and they act as the absolute sorting mechanisms for, everything that follows.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is sexual intercourse. The text explicitly states that this includes intercourse per os, meaning by mouth, or per anum, meaning by anus.
Okay.
And the critical legal elements here are that some penetration, however slight, is sufficient to meet the definition, and emission is not required.
Got it. So that is the broad physical baseline. And what is the second definition?
So the second definition is deviate sexual intercourse.
Right.
This is defined as sexual intercourse per os or per annum, specifically between human beings who are not husband and wife.
Wait, not husband and wife?
Right, or any form of sexual intercourse with an animal.
I have to push back on that phrasing immediately. I mean, looking at that explicit husband and wife carve-out, it's like reading an antique dictionary where, certain modern understandings of marriage and consent are completely frozen in time.
It definitely sounds jarring to modern ears.
Yeah, because the code is drawing a massive legally binding boundary based entirely on marital status. It literally lumps non-spouses and animals into the same structural category just to differentiate them from married couples.
What's fascinating here is how the MPC justifies this structure. If we look at the explanatory note provided in the text, it explains that these definitions aren't just vocabulary words.
Right.
They are the absolute linchpins of the entire article. This specific phrasing is what functionally separates the offenses we will see in Section 213.1 from those in 213.2.
So it's a sorting tool.
Exactly. The code is building a taxonomy of offenses. Marital status is the primary sorting mechanism used to funnel different acts into, completely different tiers of punishment.
Which brings us directly to the primary offense on this legal spreadsheet. Let's look at how the MPC structures its highest level crimes.
Okay, let's do it.
Break down the exact wording of the law for rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1.
So the general rule for rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1 has very strict elements. Element 1 is that the actor must be a male.
Okay.
Element 2, he must have sexual intercourse with a female who is not his wife.
Got it. And the third?
Element 3, there must be the presence of one of 4 specific aggravating conditions.
And what are those 4 conditions that elevate the act to this level?
Well, condition A is compulsion by force or by threat of imminent death, serious bodily injury, extreme pain, or kidnapping to be inflicted on anyone.
Wow. Okay. That's a high bar.
It is. Condition B is that he has substantially impaired her power to appraise or control her conduct by administering or employing without her knowledge drugs, intoxicants, or other means for the purpose of preventing resistance.
Right, the drug provision.
Exactly. Condition C is that the female is unconscious, and condition D is that the female is less than 10 years old.
Let's analyze a hypothetical scenario to test this rule, because the distinction between these conditions is incredibly granular.
Okay, hit me with it.
First, what are the legally dispositive facts? Imagine a male slips a powerful, tasteless sedative into the drink of a female acquaintance, not his wife,
Okay.
rendering her entirely unable to physically resist, though she remains awake and terrified, and he proceeds to have sexual intercourse with her.
All right, so the essential facts are we have a male actor and a female victim who is not his wife.
Right.
A secretly administered intoxicant is used. The victim is awake but physically paralyzed, and sexual intercourse occurs.
And what is the core legal issue?
The issue is, does the actor's conduct meet the elements of rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1b, despite the victim remaining conscious during the act?
What rule of law applies? Please state the full black-letter rule and break it down into its testable elements.
The rule of law is Section 213.1, subsection 1b. The rule has 3 elements.
Okay, listen.
First, a male who has sexual intercourse with a female, not his wife. Second, he has substantially impaired her power to appraise or control her conduct. And third, this impairment was achieved by administering, without her knowledge, drugs or intoxicants for the purpose of preventing resistance.
Thank you. Now for the elemental analysis. Let's walk through this step by step. How does the application of the first element apply here?
Let's look at the sub-issue. Does the physical act and relationship meet the baseline definition?
Right.
The sub-rule defining this element requires a male actor, a female victim, not his wife, and sexual intercourse as defined in 213.other.
Which we covered.
Exactly. Applying the facts, the actor is a male, the victim is a female acquaintance, not his wife, and sexual intercourse occurred. Therefore, the first element is clearly met.
Understood. Now, what about the second element, the substantial impairment?
Here is where the legal friction really lies. The sub-issue is whether the fact that she remained conscious negates the impairment requirement.
Because she was awake.
Right. The sub-rule we apply from 1b focuses explicitly on the power to appraise or control conduct. It does not require unconsciousness.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the explanatory note makes clear that unconsciousness is handled entirely separately under Condition 1c.
Right. Condition C.
So, applying the facts of our hypothetical, while her power to appraise the situation remained intact because she was awake, the secretly administered sedative entirely removed her physical ability to control her conduct and resist. The element only requires the impairment of the power to appraise or control. Therefore, the second element is strictly met.
Understood. Now, what about the third element, the method of administration?
So the sub-issue is whether the impairment was achieved through covert means to prevent resistance.
Okay.
The sub-rule requires the use of drugs or intoxicants administered without the victim's knowledge for that specific purpose.
And in our facts.
Applying the facts, the actor slipped a tasteless sedative into her drink without her knowledge, specifically to physically paralyze her. Thus, the third element is met.
And after analyzing all the elements, what is the final conclusion?
Because all the elements are satisfied, the act between a male and a female, not his wife, the substantial impairment of physical control, and the use of a secretly administered drug to achieve that impairment, the actor is guilty of rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1b.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does the Model Penal Code actually grade this crime in terms of punishment?
That's a great question.
Because if we are looking at this like a, mathematical spreadsheet, there has to be a way the code differentiates between different severities of this crime.
Exactly. This is where we see what the explanatory note calls the MPC's rational grading scheme. The drafters wanted a system of penalty multipliers.
Okay.
By default, rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1 is graded as a felony of the second degree.
Good degree. Got it.
It remains a second-degree felony unless it hits 2 very specific escalators that elevate it to a felony of the first degree.
What triggers that first-degree escalator? Like, what pushes it to the absolute highest tier of punishment?
Well, the first escalator is the infliction of serious bodily injury. The text explicitly references Section 210.0 for this definition.
So it's not just a scratch.
Right. It isn't just a bruise. Serious bodily injury means bodily injury which creates a substantial risk of death or which causes serious permanent disfigurement or protracted loss or impairment of the function of any bodily member or organ.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, if that occurs during the course of the rape, it escalates to a first-degree felony.
And the second escalator?
The second escalator is based entirely on the relationship between the parties.
Really?
Yeah. The crime elevates to the first degree if the victim was not a voluntary social companion of the actor upon the occasion of the crime and had not previously permitted him sexual liberties.
I mean, that is an incredibly subjective conditional statement to base a first-degree felony conviction on.
It definitely leaves a lot open to interpretation.
Voluntary social companion or previously permitted sexual liberties, these are highly interpretive phrases. But if we step back, the code in this section is dealing with extreme scenarios, imminent death, extreme pain, unconsciousness.
Right.
How does the law handle situations where coercion is absolutely present, but it just doesn't meet that mathematical extreme threshold of imminent death or extreme pain?
Well, that brings us to Section 213.1, subsection 2, which outlines the lesser offense of gross sexual imposition.
Gross sexual imposition.
Yes, because the drafters recognize that coercion comes in many forms, they created a lower tier. This is graded as a felony of the third degree.
Walk me through the elements of gross sexual imposition. How does the law define this gray area?
The foundational elements remain identical. A male having sexual intercourse with a female who is not his wife.
Right.
However, the aggravating conditions change significantly to reflect a lower threshold of coercion. A third-degree felony is committed if one of three conditions is met.
What's the first condition?
Condition A, he compels her to submit by any threat that would prevent resistance by a woman of ordinary resolution.
Interesting. And condition B?
Condition B, he knows that she suffers from a mental disease or defect which renders her incapable of appraising the nature of her conduct.
Okay. And the last one?
Or, condition C, he knows that she is unaware that a sexual act is being committed upon her, or that she submits because she mistakenly supposes that he is her husband.
It's like a sliding scale of coercion. The MPC is attempting to mathematically quantify human fear, grading a threat of extreme pain as a second-degree felony, but a threat overcoming ordinary resolution as a third-degree felony.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how they try to put a rigid metric on something as deeply personal as a person's breaking point.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is why they built it this way. The explanatory note is very transparent about their historical motivation.
Which was what?
Well, it highlights that the conduct falling under gross sexual imposition actually was punished as full rape at common law.
Right.
Yeah. Historically, rape was a blunt instrument. It was often a capital offense or carried life imprisonment. Because the penalty was so incredibly high, juries would often refuse to convict men if the victim wasn't brutally beaten, even if severe psychological coercion was used.
So the drafters of the MPC intentionally downgraded this conduct to a third-degree felony to maintain their rational grading scheme.
Exactly.
They figured that by lowering the penalty, they could actually secure more convictions for coercion that didn't involve a weapon or a threat of death.
Precisely. They separated the severity of the threats to create a more functional, pragmatic system, even if it relies on a nebulous concept like a woman of ordinary resolution.
Let's look at the other side of this spreadsheet. So far, Section 213.1 has been highly gendered, a male, a female, not his wife.
Very true.
How does the MPC handle other sexual acts, which the explanatory notes mention were previously punished as sodomy?
That is addressed in Section 213.2, which is titled, Deviate Sexual Intercourse by Force or Imposition.
Break down the structure of the law for this section. How does it compare to the rape statutes?
First, we see a major structural shift in the language. The gendered terms male and female disappear entirely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The statute shifts to gender-neutral terms. So it's a person who engages in deviate sexual intercourse with another person.
And how is it structured in terms of the actual offenses and tiers?
Well, the statute is divided into two distinct tiers that directly mirror the exact severity levels we just discussed.
Okay.
Tier 1 is Section 213.2, subsection 1, by force or its equivalent. This is a felony of the second degree.
So it maps perfectly.
Right. It uses the exact same severe conditions as rape, threat of imminent death or serious injury, secretly administered drugs, unconsciousness, or the victim being less than 10 years old.
And the second tier?
Tier 2 is Section 213.2, subsection 2, by other imposition. And this is a felony of the third degree.
And let me guess, it mirrors the other one.
Yes, it uses the exact same lesser conditions as gross sexual imposition. Threats that would prevent resistance by a person of ordinary resolution, known mental disease or defect, or unawareness.
Wait, if the structure is absolutely identical to rape, Is there a first-degree felony escalator for severe cases of deviant sexual intercourse?
That's the logical next question.
Like if serious bodily injury is inflicted during the act, does it jump to a first-degree felony like we saw in Section 213.1?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is a definitive no.
Really? No escalator at all?
And this is a crucial point of statutory interpretation for anyone reading this code. If you look at the final sentence of the explanatory note, it explicitly states that the prescribed conduct in 213.2 parallels 213.1.
Right.
But the major structural difference is that Section 213.2 contains no offense graded at the first-degree felony level.
So even if the actor inflicts a substantial risk of death, or causes permanent disfigurement, or if the victim was a complete stranger who had never been a social companion, a charge under Section 213.2 tops out at a second-degree felony.
According to the text and the explanatory note, yes, the ceiling is lower.
Wow.
The escalators for serious bodily injury and lack of prior social or sexual relationship apply exclusively to the charge of rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1. They simply do not exist in the text of Section 213.2.
That's wild.
Yeah, the kind structurally capped the punishment for deviant sexual intercourse, regardless of the violence involved.
That is a stark structural difference, and it really highlights the absolute rigidity of the MPC's taxonomy.
It really does.
All right, we've covered a tremendous amount of dense legal doctrine today. To close us out, let's move to our exam framework synthesis.
That's good.
I need you to synthesize all these rules, exceptions, and tiers into a step-by-step diagnostic checklist. If you, the listener, were to use this for issue spotting on a law exam, what is the mandatory framework to quickly break down a fact pattern?
Okay, here is the 4-step diagnostic checklist to navigate the MPC's structure. Step 1, identify the physical act and the parties. You must ask, is the conduct sexual intercourse involving a male and a female, not his wife? If so, you are sorting in Section 213.1.
Right, the first bucket.
Or is the conduct deviate sexual intercourse, meaning per os or per annum between non-spouses of any gender or involving an animal? If so, you are sorting into Section 213.2.
Okay, what's step 2?
Step 2, evaluate the level of incapacity or coercion. Does the fact pattern meet the high bar of extreme coercion, like force, threat of extreme pain or death, secretly administered drugs, unconsciousness, or a victim under 10? Or does it meet the lower bar, threats overcoming ordinary resolution, known mental defect, or deception?
Got it. Step 3.
Step 3, grade the offense. Map your findings from Step 2. The high bar maps to a second-degree felony. The lower bar maps to a third-degree felony.
And the final step.
Step 4, check for escalators. And remember, you only perform this step if you landed on a charge of rape under Section 213.1, subsection 1.
Right, because 213.2 doesn't have them.
Exactly. Check for the 2 first-degree escalators. Did the actor inflict serious bodily injury per the Section 210.0 definition, or was there a lack of prior social and sexual relationship between the parties? If neither is present, it remains a second-degree felony.
So what does this all mean? We've just spent this entire deep dive mapping out the Model Penal Code's attempt to create a perfectly rational grading scheme.
We have.
We've moved from first to second to third-degree felonies, like moving blocks on a spreadsheet, trying to calculate the exact threshold of human trauma.
Yeah.
But look closely at the language making up those blocks. Major felony convictions, literal years of a person's life, hinge on highly subjective, almost nebulous concepts.
Right.
What exactly is a woman of ordinary resolution? Who defines what a voluntary social companion is on the specific occasion of a crime?
Yeah.
It leaves you to wonder, can the rigid elemental checklists of the law ever truly capture the messy, traumatic realities of coercion and consent? Or does reducing human experience to a structured mathematical diagnostic inevitably mean that justice will always be lost in the gray areas?